Hello, in this chapter we are going to talk about the test of significance. When I was doing undergraduation MBBS, at that time I used to wonder why do we have this funny kind of name test of significance. Now after a couple of years I understood why do we have this test of significance. I take your journey back to the previous module where you had seen this slide probably, where we had group A and group B and we take all the data, put into a machine and then we find the value called as p-value. The output of this machine is always a p-value, but just imagine in my office we have different types of machines. For every situation I have a different machine. Two groups quantitative data, one type of machine. Two groups qualitative, another type of machine. Two groups ordinal data, you have another machine. Three groups ordinal, one group ordinal, whatever it is, for every situation we have different machines. It is the same principle like you all have smartphones. If you want to call a taxi, you will call a taxi app. You won't open a Google Mail or Yahoo Mail or HDFC Bank to send you a taxi, right? Let us say you want to check email. You will open email accounts. You don't open Ola, Uber or some other taxi app, and you don't open HDFC Bank or ICICI Bank to check your mail and tell it to you. So what I want to say is that you know that which app, what is the input and what is the output. But do you know how that app functions? On the same principle, you don't know that, right? On the same principle, this thing works. You are not supposed to know what is there in the machine, but you just need to know that what machine to use in what situation to give you an appropriate p-value. So what are these machines? These machines are nothing but they are mathematical formulas. These are statistical formulas, mathematical formula to derive a p-value, and based on the p-value, we will determine whether the p-value is significant or it is non-significant. So can I say to these mathematical formula, let us call them as tests for significance. Are you understanding what is test for significance? These are simple mathematical formula which are going to help you derive the p-values, and based on the p-values we are going to determine whether it is significant or non-significant. What is there inside the formula? We are not at all bothered. Let us go ahead and talk about the test of significance, which can be important to you in your MCQ exam. This is a 5-star topic for us. So most time in the exam, they will give you a situation and they'll ask you what test of significance you are going to choose. That's the end of the question. So what are the tests of significance which you need to know for your exam? The test of significance or the test for significance, the test for significance or the test of significance can broadly be classified into two types. We can have something called as the parametric test for significance, or we can have the non-parametric test of significance. The parameters, the parametric, that roughly means the quantitative data. You remember in the first chapter, in the first section in biostats, we discussed about quanti data or quali data. So quantitative data, for quantitative data, we are essentially going to use parametric test. For qualitative data, we are essentially going to use non-parametric test. Also for most of the normal distribution data, you are going to use parametric test. In case the data is qualitative, essentially you're going to use non-parametric. But in case if the data is quantitative and does not obey the normal distribution, in those cases also we may use non-parametric. So a non-normal distribution data is also a non-parametric data, but this is a very rare thing. Like for your MCQ exam, it's a very rare thing to be asked. But you should know that where to use a parametric test. It is done for all cases of normally distributed quantitative data. For any case of qualitative data and not normal distributed quantitative data, we use non-parametric test. So what I'll do is that in the center, I am going to write the situation which is going to happen. And on either side, I will take the parametric or the non-parametric test. So let's start it on single table and it is solve all your MCQs. Let us say for a single group. What do you mean by single group? Single group means one group. It does not mean two groups. It does not mean three groups. It means only one group. So single group parametric test of significance, we call it as a t-test. We call it as a t-test. In case there are two groups, In case there are two groups, for parametric test, it is again called a t-test. So now you will say that what is happening over here? Please remember that in a single group, if it is a t-test, in single group, if it is a quantitative data, it is called as a paired t-test. Why did I lay so stress? Because what is a single group? So you have group A and you give them the drug and you are going to check them again. So this data is pre-test and this is post-testing and this is the intervention, right? So you're going to assess the variation between A and B in the same population. And that is the reason it is called as a paired t-test. Paired means it's the paired, the group is same, right? In case it is for two groups, it is independent sample t-test, also called as unpaired t-test. Are we simple till now? In case of there are three groups, now in case there are three or more groups, mind you, I am not saying three or more. What does it mean, three or more? Three or more does not mean two. It does not mean one. 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 or 100, whatever number. But 3 does not mean 2. So many times students get confused. I don't know why. But in case there are 3 or more groups, multiple groups, more than 3 or 3 groups, and the data is quantitative, normally distributed data, parametric test has to be applied. The parametric test of significance would be analysis of variance. What is ANOVA? Analysis of variance. ANOVA is analysis of variance. So you're going to do ANOVA test or analysis of variance. Are we cool till now? Easy. Next MCQ. Let's go to the other side. We'll talk about the non-parametric test. Please mind it that for single group, in case of non-parametric test, you might face some difficult names. That is the reason if you see closely, it's like a slightly larger area I have built. So the non-parametric test for single group is called as a Mac-Niemer test. It is called as a Mac-Niemer test. Single group non-parametric test, that is called as Mac-Niemer test. In case it is two groups, it is called as a chi-square test. Please remember it's a chi-square. We don't say it as a chi-square or a chi-square. It's a chi-square test. And it is given by a symbol like X with a long leg. So X square, that is a chi-square test. In case it is a 3 group or more than 3 groups, the test of significance can be 2 over here. We can either use a Kruskal-Wallis test, or we can use something called as a chi-square for trends. So sometimes we can use chi-square for trends in case of 3 or more groups just to see the test of the level of significance between these 3 groups. Or technically speaking, which is the test of significance you are going to mark, it is Kruskal-Wallis. But I'm just preparing you for the bad option. In case Kruskal-Wallis is not there in the option, you can very well go with the chi-square for trends option. So in certain situations, I'm trying to tell you that chi-square can also be used for 3 or more groups. And the test of significance, the test for significance is slightly changed. It's called as a chi-square for trends test. So with that is all that you require for your MCQ exam, for most of the MCQ exam. But talking specifically of the advanced test of significance, which may be asked in your AIMS exam. In those cases, you might be asked to do something a little bit more into it. So what is this MCQ about large sample? In cases of large sample, what do you mean by a large sample? And the sample size more than 30. If the sample size is more than 30, technically and scientifically speaking, statistically speaking, the test of significance, it becomes as a Z test. This Z is not that standard deviate. Z score is different and standard deviate is the Z score and Z test is different. Please try to understand that there is a slight controversy not controversy, there could be a slight confusion over here that conventionally speaking, any test for quantitative data, we call it as a t-test. But for large sample, we call it as a Z test. but that is only statistically speaking. But the formula for each of them, for the t-test and for the z-test, it's all the same. So if you get a question that in my MCQ, I got a question that there were 100 people for whom the hemoglobin was checked, and what is the test of significance you are going to apply? There was 2 groups were there, or 1 group was there. What is the test of significance? See, what is hemoglobin? It is a quantitative data. It is probably showing a normal distribution. Until and unless said otherwise, we always assume it's a normal distribution. So it is a normally distributed data. 100 individual sample size is more. In options, they had given chi-square, and they had given a t-test, and they had given some other test. Z-test was not there in the option. So I cannot stand up and ask the examiner that, sir, you have not given Z-test. This is a wrong question. No. Conventionally speaking, any test for quantitative, we call it as a t-test. But in case if such a question comes and Z-test is also there in the option, then it will be much wiser if you mark the Z-test, because that is technically correct answer. Are you understanding what I am trying to say? I don't want to generate controversy over here that answer is not t-test, it is Z-test. But please mind it, Z-test would be a better answer if you get that in the option. For ordinal data, this can be very well your question for ordinal data. You remember nominal, ordinal, interval, ratio scales. For ordinal type of data where you have stages or grades, in those cases you need to rank them. So we do a rank test. What is the name of the rank test, beta? It is called as Wilcoxon rank test. It is called as Wilcoxon rank test. Wilcoxon rank test is of 2 types. We can have a Wilcoxon rank sum test or a Wilcoxon rank sign test. Wilcoxon rank sum test, sum with the U. Wilcoxon rank sum test is for ungrouped data, and Wilcoxon rank sign test is for a grouped data. Wilcoxon rank sum test or Wilcoxon rank sign test, these are for ordinal data. How do you check for normalcy of data? Normalcy of data is checked by Kolmogorov-Smirnov test. Kolmogorov-Smirnov test is going to tell you about the normalcy, whether the data is normal or not. How do you check for outliers? Outliers are checked using a Dixon Q test. Dixon's Q test is done to check for outliers. How do you check the internal consistency of a questionnaire? Internal consistency of a questionnaire is checked by another test that is called as a Cronbach alpha score. So these are technically not tests for significance. These are statistical tests. Dixon Q test is a statistical test. Normalcy of data is a statistical test. Internal consistency to a certain the questionnaire level is a Cronbach alpha score, that is a statistical test. Comparing a new test with gold standard test, that is done using a statistical test that is called as a Bland Altman analysis. Bland Altman analysis. Next, another type of biostatistical test is to check for the level of agreement. This could be your prospective MCQ. It could be your anytime in your exams prospective MCQ. The level of agreement is given by a kappa test. Kappa test. Kappa test is given by the formula. It is observed value, observed level of agreement minus the expected level of agreement. Observed level of agreement minus the expected level of agreement divided by 1 minus the expected level of agreement. Divided by 1 minus the expected level of agreement. That is what is a kappa test. So in the exam, they will give you that the observed level of agreement between people were 80% and the expected was 50%. So they have already given you observed is 80% and expected is 50%. Just replace the values and you get a level of kappa, and that will tell you what is the kappa test. And kappa level of agreement is required. So like less than 10%, 10 to 30% agreement, 30-50 agreement. So that's how we just grade them. You don't need to go into the grading criteria for kappa test, but at least you should know that where do we use a kappa test of significance. right? So with that, I think most of your tests of significance are done. But please remember all these important tests of significance which you have done. This is a 5-star topic for you. You can't afford to miss this. These will also be discussed during the MCQ session so that you are able to revise them. But for now, just keep in mind that single test, Mach-Nehmer, chi-square and Kruskal-Wallis is used for qualitative test of significance.